Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting. Full details of questions submitted and the Mayor's written replies have been circulated and are on the Council website and will also be displayed on the screen as we work through them. Groups have submitted their questions in priority order and I will, as usual, take supplementary questions on a rota basis. Each councillor can ask a maximum of 2 supplementary questions. Due to the notification of the by-election in Brislington East, the council remains subject to the pre-election protocol. I expect everyone to act appropriately and any attempts at electioneering will not be tolerated. Thank you. If we move to question 1, Hipak Jama, she's obviously not here. Question 2, which is a Conservative question, Councillor Galandris, vehicle dwelling on highways. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. And Marvin, thank you very much for your answer. The reason that there's a flurry of questions on van dwelling on the highway is that we've had a meeting with residents, the police and various council officers, and the policy at the moment means that the neighbourhood enforcement team have to look at everything on a case-by-case basis, which has caused them quite a lot of extra work. Do you think that the neighbourhood enforcement team are sufficiently well resourced to cope with this?
That fits within a wider question about the level of resource we have in the council as a whole, and there are lots of teams that are really stretched across this organisation, to be perfectly frank. So would we like more resource in the team? We would, and I haven't talked to them directly myself, but I suspect they are going to be stretched. I know enforcement as a whole has faced lots of challenges in the council, having the people around, being able to get around the city, whether it be on housing or litter enforcement, fly tipping and so forth. So it is a challenge. I don't know, Paul, this is about the van dwelling. I said I'm going to open the floor to Paul at some time. It might be in a later question as well, but we are trying to move and take this seriously in sympathy with residents, but also the needs of those people that are living in vehicles and caravans.
It's absolutely right that we deal with any issues on a case-by-case basis and look at the individual circumstances of the people involved and the level of antisocial behaviour or nuisance that is or isn't being caused. To suggest that we have a blanket approach, I would suggest to you, smacks of outrageous totalitarian socialism.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. If I could ask my second supplementary, and the first thing is I would say, Marvin, I think I might have or rather poorly phrased my question, my question 2. What I was looking for is whether there's some sort of halfway house. I'm not suggesting that we're going to be able to put the van dwellers in brand new sort of houses, but is there some other form of solution that might be, some temporary solution where we might be able to find, because we set up travellers' camps. I was wondering whether there might be some ways of doing something for van dwellers where there is hookup electricity and there's a bit of a sort of water and loo facilities. I don't know whether that might be something that you could consider.
I would be interested in the Conservative administration, the Conservative Party, maybe suggesting some sites and then we can go and look at them. I suspect they probably won't be in your wards.
Thank you. If we can go on to Green question 1, Councillor Fodor, please.
Yes, thanks very much, Lord Mayor. I asked one of these questions previously and didn't get a reply, and in the replies from the Mayor this time, again, he hasn't replied to one of my questions, and he addresses me with a question himself. I just firstly wonder, Lord Mayor, if member forum is not for members to ask the Mayor questions, and the Mayor wants to ask us questions, should there be a Mayor's forum so he can ask us questions in his turn? Because I'd like to have a reply to my questions, and I don't feel I've had them both answered yet.
That may be something that we could deal with another time. I think that's probably quite a good there may be some mileage in that in the future. Obviously today, can I ask you to ask a supplementary question? If that was your supplementary question, then the responses come from me and I think from Marvin as well. If you have another supplementary question or...
I do indeed. I'm disappointed that, firstly, I think the Mayor's been ill-advised because if Nicola Beach was here, she would confirm that energy issues are not part of planning considerations, so that doesn't address the point I raised about digital billboards in the city, and the unequal impact of them on different wards in the city.
Can I ask you to ask a supplementary question rather than make a statement, please? Thank you very much indeed.
Sure. Does the Mayor agree that the Property Department should not be actively promoting body shaming, mass consumption and unequal community impacts on different wards in our city, because some have no digital billboards, and in the absence of a policy setting an equal level of amenity, this is going to continue and it will impact communities differently.
I think it's a bit of a stretch to suggest that council officers are proactively encouraging body shaming in the city. I'm not sure where to take the question, Councillor.
Can you just let the Mayor respond, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you've had quite a thing about cutting me off recently, but I don't know. I just think it's a very provocative question. I don't understand your logic. The council is not involved in promoting body shaming. With our public health team and the Thrive programme and all the work we're doing around mental health, it's about building resilience in our young people in the programme to combat adverse childhood early experiences, support kids in the care system, care leavers. This is all about building the city up. But yeah, I mean, we're not. That's what we're doing.
Could I just refer to the Property Department's planning application?
Do you have a second supplementary question?
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the Property Department has been the active applicant for digital billboards on occasion in the city. It's just a point of information.
Sorry, a moment I've lapsed. I understand that you've had 2 supplementary questions, so thank you very much. Can we come on to question 1 from the Lib Dems? Councillor Khan, please.
Thank you, Mayor, for your answer, but I think this answer, of course I do take it for an answer, but it's just sake of answer. I would like to know that there was some money ring-fenced for this purpose. If you have any understanding, where is those money gone to? And I would ask my second supplementary question is that when do you think that demand and supply analysis will be done and you will have further understanding that whether there is a real need in a pool in Speedwell area? As you know that people from that area, you're suggesting to go to Eastern Leisure Centre and other places is too far apart and it's not an ideal thing to use day to day, a pool that's so far with children and so on from that area.
So in terms of the wider capital programme, it's something we keep under review. Obviously, there are lots of priorities on council time and resource. So when I say it comes in that context. In terms of the emphasis you put on the pool and its relationship to tackling deprivation in the city, we've known each other for a long time, so apart from trying to avoid the image of you doing laps in Speedos and so forth, I say it is a real stretch to make that association. We've, over the last year, well actually over the last 3 years, worked with city partners to identify a vision for 2050 and all the priorities we have to deliver in Bristol up to 2050. Last year we had 3 overarching city priorities: tackling street conflict and knife crime, and unfortunately we had the incidents over the weekend, tackling period poverty and dealing with childcare. When we think about the big city challenges in the face of climate crisis, housing crisis, growing inequality, the swimming pool at Bristol East is not up there in terms of what we need to be delivering for the people of Bristol. It's housing and basic needs. So I think that the pool has taken on symbolic value. and it would be a nice to have if we had the space, and not just a financial space, but the officer space to be able to put their time to planning it and delivering it. But in the face of all the crises we face today, I'd have to challenge you on saying how high a priority and where would you put this and what would you knock off the list of to-dos that we have as an authority to make space for this to be delivered. So that would be my, in the name of discussion, not illegitimate question. In the name of discussion, I'd welcome to say, what would you not do to make it possible for us to do this?
Just in addition to my supplementary.
Excuse me, Councillor Khan, you've had your two questions.
I appreciate, but
Sorry,
how important it is development for our children's mental well-being and physical well-being.
Thank you very much indeed. To be fair, you've had your two questions, supplementary questions.
Thank you.
So I need to move on. Thank you very much. Can I move to question 2 from the Labour Group, Chris Jackson? Chris, before you ask your supplementaries, can I just ask you to be aware that we are in a pre-election period with regards to particular services? Thank you.
In that case, Lord Mayor, I'd like to ask a question of the monitoring officer. As my question is a roundabout, that's why I didn't put the 36 bus in. But what legal... We've had a Brisbane West member, candidate, have a question ruled out of order for today because of what you've just said, Lord Mayor. Can I ask the legal officer what advice he's given the Lord Mayor? Because there is a question from a Brisbane West candidate being allowed in public forum.
Do you want a response from me, or would you like a response from the monitor? The Brislington West Liberal Democrat Council is a petition they're bringing about Brislington West. The Brislington West Labour candidate is bringing forward questions about the service which runs through Brislington East. So that's the difference. Brislington West and Brislington East are two different wards, as you're well aware.
Okay, thank you. Well, personally, I'd like to thank the Mayor for the answers to the questions, especially the one on the Hartcliffe Way reuse recycle, because obviously that's within my ward. And residents are really pleased, and we'd like that to move along. On the bus, obviously it's a bit... I asked the question, and the answer is already the bus service have been saved for 3 months. What guarantees, if any, can you give us? I can go back to residents and say the 91 and 96 will continue after March.
Well, as part of our, our bus deal, what we're trying to do is enhance all the bus services in the city. We'll make every commitment to making sure that we're protecting those services and tackling the transport poverty that's bedeviled so many of the people in the community. If I go back to your second question, Chris, and I really welcome the fact that you did call it a reuse and recycling centre. I know there's some incredible sensitivity and woundedness in pointing out the distinction between a recycling centre and a tip. So it's really good for the sake of your communities that we are making that point. Thank you for that.
Councillor Jackson, do you have a second supplementary? Thank you. We move on to Conservative question 2, Councillor Gollop, vehicle dwelling on highways.
My first supplementary, Lord Mayor, is I'd really like some clarification of how one arrives at the position that people living in caravans are more vulnerable than people living in motorhomes, and how that relates to the vulnerability that residents feel from those vehicles outside of their front doors or very close to their front doors.
Yeah, it's just about balancing the risks that our frontline officers see amongst those communities. I mean, if I was to go off my I'll be very careful with the press in the room about what you say and what is then spun from it. But I think that trusting the way our officers work with our community organisations, we have to go with their expertise, that as they work with people who are living in vehicles on caravans, they are on a case-by-case basis assessing the needs of those individuals that they come across. Paul.
Thank you, Lord
It's
Mayor.
also, can I just follow up to that and just say, there is a legal difference between a caravan being left on the highway and a MOT'd and taxed motor vehicle. So there are legal reasons why there is a different approach taken as well.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just an aside, Lord Mayor, I always go careful with what I say, but I make it clear I also always welcome the press presence. I think it's fundamental to our democratic role, and I'm delighted that they're here. I'm wondering, Lord Mayor, if the Mayor can confirm that he is advising that any resident with a complaint or a concern should report that to neighbourhood enforcement, because my residents are not clear. They actually have a real concern about troubling council officers with problems, but they feel very, very unprotected and don't know what to do. So just the clarification, should they report it to neighbourhood enforcement?
Yeah, they should. And I would concur with what you say. I also welcome high quality journalists being in the room, but I don't think the word press actually is synonymous with the phrase.
Thank you. We'll move on to the Greens. Question 2, Councillor Steve Clark, Bristol Airport expansion. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thanks for your answer, Marvin. I'm slightly bemused. Can I just ask a direct question? Has the Mayor actually read the independent NEF report, which states that the benefits of the expansion have been grossly overstated? Has he personally read it?
Yeah, I've gone into that report, yeah. I haven't read it word for word right the way through, but I've gone over the report. I get lots of reports coming in about many, many issues.
So you have read it, okay.
Yeah, I've worked through the report.
Okay, thank you. My second supplementary is, the Mayor mentioned the climate crisis in one of his answers just now. I'm just checking, is he aware that the net impact of the expansion alone, so not the whole airport, the expansion alone, is an extra 1.2 million tonnes of carbon, which is nearly as much as the whole of the emissions of Bristol, which is 1.5 million tonnes. So is he aware of those facts?
So the important thing to register is that the decision, despite the attempt to mystify things, this is a decision for North Somerset. What you've been asking me to do, actually in your initial questions, is simply write a letter to the Planning Committee of North Somerset. Will have no impact on North Somerset in any way. You may as well, in asking me about Bristol expansion, ask me about Heathrow, Belfast, Southampton, or any of the others that are talking about where they are going. And you could take the opportunity in full council, in Bristol full council, to raise issues over which we have a degree of control, such as the One City Plan and the environment and sustainability track of that plan with the climate advisory panel. We could have raised issues about the city leap, house building, the types and the location of housing, food growing in every ward, going for gold. Any of the cost of transition to 2030 targets, the city leap, so many issues could have been asked about. But this is a North Somerset decision for a North Somerset Planning Authority.
But the Mayor will well know that he's an important...
I think you've had your 2 supplementary questions.
Thank you. He is the most important stakeholder
thank you very much. You've had
region.
your 2 supplementary questions.
What he says makes
thank
a
you very
difference
much.
to
If
this
you'd like to
application.
take your seat, please, because you've had your 2 supplementaries. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Lib Dem question 2. Councillor Kent is unfortunately on his way here from a serious family issue, and it's been agreed with the whips that Councillor Hopkins can ask the supplementaries in his place. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'm grateful to the other parties for agreeing this, and this in no way sets a precedent for people casually stepping in. Thank you. With the first one, we have from the Mayor a selective quote from a draft report. So can we either have the draft report shared to everybody, or should the Mayor refrain from selectively quoting from draft reports?
So, Lord Mayor, as I understand it, similar requests to read out the question on behalf of someone who's not here have been refused. So on that basis, I'm just going to go in line with that standard of fairness, and I won't answer this question on that basis.
You're not listening to the whips, then?
You're not listening to what was agreed between all parties before this meeting in the agenda conference, and it was specifically because Councillor Kent had been informed that a close relative was at the point of death that he had to leave the city in a hurry, and that is why the whips agreed that the supplementary questions could be asked.
Councillor Hopkins, if I can just give Marvin some... Marvin, can I just give you some clarification? Under normal circumstances, obviously we wouldn't let somebody else ask supplementaries on behalf of somebody else. But obviously I set a precedent because in my naivety and in hindsight, I'm very glad I did it because Councillor Langley was not here for the meeting, and I think Councillor Jackson asked the supplementary questions. So I did that in that instance. Obviously, it's unusual. I was very glad I've done it, obviously, as I say, in hindsight. Councillor Kent's mother-in-law is very ill in Boston, Lancashire. He's driving back now, and that's why it was asked today. At the Whips meeting, it was agreed that we could take this unusual step. I totally agree with you that it shouldn't make it the norm, to be quite honest with you. So,
okay, well, I appreciate that, Lord Mayor. Thanks for the clarification on that, and on that basis, you know, that's fine. So the report will be available to the city, the full report. But what I would say is actually the article I wrote, the blog I wrote, was actually in response to what I've seen as a bit of a deliberate and a sustained attack on women in my cabinet, and trying to score very low-grade points from people not attending the many meetings that this organisation churns out, often sometimes in the name of not doing very much. And the point I was making, which needs to be recognised as well, is that if we have the most diverse cabinet in the most diverse administration the city's ever known, and if we are serious about inclusion and diversifying our leadership, then we need to take appropriate measures. And with the disproportionate burden of childcare falling onto the shoulders of women, as we look at, and our cabinet, 6 of us have children under the age of 10, then when people have childcare issues, like a sick child, or they have to come to a meeting with a child, that we need to be ready to manage that. That was the point of the blog. And in referencing Anna, it was to point out that she is doing a fantastic job since taking over. We've turned the corner. You know, so to try and make the point, as one opposition member seemed to suggest, that she is not delivering for Bristol was just outrageous, and I was defending her on that point.
I note you, again, have not answered the question, which is specifically about why we're letting down our children with special needs. Supplementary to the second one, where again, Councillor Kent has pointed out to me that you have not answered the question. It's a practical question with regard to assessments as to whether they've been done or not. And you've chosen again to go off onto some completely
have you asked your question?
Tangential
point. If you've asked your question,
can we have the answer to the question, please?
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. I think you've made your point clear. Thank you.
I mean, what I was addressing women in leadership, because this whole thing is birthed in, like I said, a sustained series of attacks from opposition on the women in my cabinet and leadership, and taking cheap points there. So it's not a tangential point to talk about the diversity in the city's leadership. And looking at our front bench, you will see what that looks like, and the difference it begins to make on some of the drives that we've had, be it child poverty, the Children's Charter, period-friendly Bristol, safer streets for the city. You've got an answer in there that we've sent to you about the numbers around the education health plans for children and young people. We recognise that there's an ongoing challenge. What I would say is this challenge did not appear in an abstract. There were years of build-up to where we are today. And what we are doing is putting resource into it, reorienting the whole team to make sure that we address not only the backlog, but are up front on tackling the new cases that come to us now. But it's not the report, as I said, the report is with us. The report will be available, and you'll have every chance to go over it. But we recognise on many fronts, Bristol has not delivered for the people in the city. I was one of those children who grew up in the city with the city not delivering for me and people like me. So we want justice. That's what we're known for pushing for in Bristol.
Are you happy?
Thank you. You've had your 2 supplementaries. Thank you. If you move on to Labour question 3, Councillor Pickerskill, St Mark's Road. Do you have any supplementaries?
I do, thank you. And thank you for the reply. And I know you share with us our pride in St Mark's Road. I just wanted to follow up really around Sill, and I welcome the fact that the administration's new process has actually allowed some redistribution of wealth, and so areas like East and Lawrence Hill are getting new playgrounds and youth provision. But I wanted to know what more the administration might be able to do to redistribute resources to the most deprived wards in the area, in the city which some of my colleagues represent, who have been historically underfunded and are still not getting their fair share of SIL funding.
Well, I think one of the first things, my starting point straight out of the traps would be to listen, and to listen to the councillors in wards that have historically been under-resourced and left behind about what are the key challenges in those wards, so we don't end up sitting in a back room coming up with solutions to problems that people aren't identifying. Those issues around access to economic opportunity, to jobs, to employment, housing, stability, mental health services, and so forth. So my first point would be, tell us what those key challenges are in the ward. Then there is also a vehicle coming through in which those insights can get traction and travel, and that is in our commitment to delivering an inclusive economic development strategy. One of the points we've made repeatedly when we are offered the baubles of big economic injections was, what kind of economic development does this offer us? Does it offer us a form of economic development that will compound inequalities, or does it offer us an economic opportunity that will enable us by its very nature to reduce inequalities? So listening with that new city emphasis on inclusion and sustainability, I think the two hand in hand will stand us in good stead.
Okay, thank you. It was specifically around SIL, though, I'm asking. I wonder
Asha?
if Councillor Craig...
Okay. Yes, so as we all know, SIL has actually had a really positive effect, particularly on those communities who were excluded from the process before. And I think one of the things that I'm really keen to see happening, and I hope to have a further conversation with the chairs of the Area Sales Committee, is how we can go a little bit further in order to spread some more of the funding that we have to those areas who are still actually kind of going under the radar and are still not benefiting from the substantial amounts of resources that we've been able to agree upon. So I'd like us to have a conversation with the chairs of each of the area committees in the new year, and we can discuss how we can spread the money a little bit further.
Brilliant, that's what I was hoping to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move on to Conservative question 3, Councillor Abraham, vehicle dwelling on highways.
Thank you very much indeed, my Lord Mayor, and Merry Christmas to you. Can I thank the Mayor for the reply? Very, very helpful and very useful. I wonder, as a supplementary, if I just may ask, is the Mayor aware that what was described as a blitz was going to take place within Paris Lane and around there? That arose after a meeting we held locally, and Parking Services said they'd come and do it. That is demonstrated in your reply, which is very useful, but it is a fact that we're going back to the situation where there was no inspections. So I'd like some comment on that. I think the real key, though, is that the officers have recommended changes, which we welcome, and I'm happy, and I'm sure my colleagues are, to play a full part in that negotiation, or whatever it is, consultation. But I wondered if the Mayor will sort of move that on for us, because it's most urgent and clearly demonstrated in your reply that it works and that people were moving on, which is what we want to create, and not somebody staying for days and hours and not allowing the normal movement that we expect. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, I welcome members' engagement in this. That's what we are here for. So I welcome you raising it, and thanks for your response. We're happy to work with people and work out how we go on. I would just make one small, which is a minor point, but it just struck out to me. I hope that when we do work with people, that we never describe it kind of the blitz. It seems quite adversarial. We're not blitzing anyone. It's just a minor point on a language we'd use. What we need to do is take care of everyone, but try and get people to live. It's not a point of contention. It's just a word that just dropped in there. So what we want to do is make sure that never mind. I'll tell you what. I'll leave it there because obviously, of course, we'll pick it up outside. We want to work with you. We want to find a solution. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I understand the challenges because it's right near my house. Right, I've got a considerable number of van dwellers and caravan dwellers, and sometimes we've had a van dumped and just left. It's been there for about 8 months now. I've taken a few pictures of it myself, so I recognise the impact it can have on people, and actually it causes some risk, particularly where children are crossing the road to go to school, and it's not always to deal with it. But I'm trying to think, how do we make sure the city is managed in an acceptable way? But also, how do we take care of people that might find themselves in circumstances in which they are living in vehicles, in caravans, and that's a tightrope that we have to walk. But I take the challenge and keep it coming.
Councillor Abraham, do you have a second supplementary? Thank you very much. Move on to Green, question 3, Councillor Comley, blacklisting.
So it was a Green motion in 2013, before the Mayor or I were elected, that put a strong stance against blacklisting into Bristol City Council policy, making the answer I've been given inaccurate as well as disrespectful in tone. In that Green motion, Council resolved to exclude companies involved in blacklisting of workers from securing future council contracts. Can the Mayor assure me that no new contracts have been given to any company involved in blacklisting during his term of office?
So, on the front, we are the administration that works with our unions. We've arranged a meeting with the National Construction Officer from Unite the Union. Obviously, we have a very close relationship with, to further the reach of our construction charter that we've signed and that they are incredibly happy with. And this will take place in the new year, and we'll discuss blacklisting with them then. And make our plans for how we're going to manage council and council contracts going forward. But all I can say is, in terms of the unions on the front end of this, they're very happy with our performance as an authority. We've delivered for them in ways that no administration has before.
Sorry, was that a yes or a no?
What I'm saying is, we're working with the unions to make sure that what we do is workable.
Do you have a second supplementary?
In that same Green motion, Council also resolved to seek to terminate contracts where companies are found to be using blacklists where possible. As an assurance that this has actively been looked into, can the Mayor tell me what penalties were found to be in place in the case of the Kier and Scanser contracts?
So, I mean, you can get some more detail, but I refer you to my answer. There are contracts that we are, some contracts we are banned in that create us some difficulty. But look at my answer. If you want to know more, you can write to me and we'll give you that answer.
Thank you. Move on to Lib Dem question 3, Councillor Negus, Cottam and North Bristol.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I just hope and expect that the members of our Free Press will not feel intimidated by anything they've heard this afternoon. I'll go on to ask my supplementary to the first question. This is a very anodyne answer, and I realise that this is a process. The process of the Clean Air Zone and implementation is ongoing. But the fact is, from day one, and probably before that, there will be an impact on those areas outside the zone. It is not an answer to say, we'll see how this goes and try and sort something out much later on. I'm very concerned about this. I get a lot of correspondence about this. It's a very valid point, and so is the point that pollution is not just bad when it's very bad. It's actually bad all the time, and exporting pollution and poor air is also going to make an impact on these areas. What are we doing about it now? It's a simple answer. Are we conducting any studies now?
So I think maybe you have either misread or misunderstood the answer we put down, or kind of not followed the journey we've been on this for the last number of years. The first thing is, all last year when we were taking quite a few hits and a fair bit of misinformation about what we were saying around the clean air zone, the clear point we were making was, if you jump into this thing two-footed without thinking, there are many, many unintended consequences. It didn't seem to get much traction in the chamber when we were raising this as people, and as we were sharing that these were the concerns we were raising. I raised them with the minister. We talked about the implications for the hospital. We talked about the implications for small business and low-income people in particular. I asked if there had been conversations with Bays, with Department of Health, and it would have been great to have had a number of people in the chamber also at that same time saying, yes, we have a legal duty to reach compliance in the shortest possible time, but as a city, we need the support to make sure that in the process of reaching compliance in the shortest possible time, we are not having the unintended consequences of disadvantaging people in the city. And so what we have done for many months now is been in the process of working out, one is, how do we choose the option from those that are available to us that does minimize that impact, but secondly, how we begin to plan for the mitigations. So I'm sure you'll be thrilled to know that even before it was in the headlines, I was at the Clean Air Summit in London with Sadiq Khan, Andy Burnham, Andy Street from the Midlands, and we all raised with Michael Gove the need for an extra £1.5 billion in the Clean Air Fund to support just transitions and support for a diesel transition scheme. It wasn't a headline issue then, so no one was talking about it. But nonetheless, we did that. Michael Gove said you can't have that. We warned him that it would have negative impacts on our ability for the transition. Then just a few weeks ago, we were up in London again with the Transport Minister. And the point we were making again was that local authorities need proper resourcing, and so do our city partners, to support their transition. Again, in terms of support to transition away from diesel vehicles, but also with the investment in infrastructure to move away from petrol over to electric and everything that goes with it as well. So these questions around the mitigations are things that we've been talking about for some time. We've been planning. And this morning, I'm sure you'll be pleased to know, this morning we met with probably about 16 to 18 city leaders representing health, police, universities, business, culture sector, voluntary sector, and Mike Jackson, our head of paid service, talked them through the clean air zone. And what we are doing is working with them to look at the implications of it for all of those organisations. And our communities, and talk about how we make sure we support a high-quality transition into something we have to do.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure you would recognise that we did give you that support. In fact, all parties gave you that support at Oslam and the Cabinet meeting. My supplementary to question 2, the reason I asked this question, because it's an incredibly important question, is the way this council works. I've been a councillor here for 11 years. This has been a problem for the entire time I've been a councillor. And I have to tell you, the answers I've got back from officers are not the answers you've given me. We do not have this interdepartmental cohesion about solving these problems. I can tell you that if somebody applies for a landlord's licence, they get a landlord's licence. They don't have to produce evidence that they've got approval to run that premises, planning approval or anything else. They simply get it. And after that event, having paid out money...
Can you ask a supplementary question, please?
This is my supplementary. Having asked for that money, which we've taken from possibly under false pretences, we then have a retrospective planning application to put it right. How can you, please... Can you make sure these officers get their heads together and give you the answer that they've been giving me? I can provide those answers to you. It's got to be resolved, and we've got to understand this.
So, 2 things, I'd say, Councillor Negus. Firstly is, if you have specific examples, if you can bring them to us, that will be very helpful. Yeah, very specific examples. The secondly is, in your question, one of the points you made was about the committees needing to work harder at this area as well. And the committees are made up of councillors. So if you have a concern that councillors in the chamber on the committees are not doing the fullness of their job and not approaching it with the energy that you would wish, then my suggestion is that actually you do take the opportunity to talk to your fellow councillors as well. I'm not sitting on the committees myself, am I? Paul?
It's a multifaceted problem. Thanks for your
I just
response.
wanted to clarify something about what Anthony just said in his question about the granting of licences. Now, this isn't like a driving licence where you have to pass a test to get the licence. The licence is a requirement, and therefore people have to apply for the licence, and if they apply for it, they get it, and then that's followed up with an inspection of the premises to make sure it meets the licensing requirements. But just to say again, the licence doesn't require planning. You're absolutely right, it doesn't require them to have planning permission, because actually we are in the places where we have HMO licensing, we're requiring that license. Now, that might be flushing out properties that don't have planning permission, but the planning process is a completely different legal process to the licensing process. And I think you've slightly misrepresented the licensing process. If we could refuse people licenses, that isn't the basis. It's a requirement, not a qualification.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Councillor Neaglas. Thank you very much. Labour question for Councillor Thrall for sports investment.
Thank you. I only have one supplementary question. So thank you to the Mayor for his response. It was good to see that the Tennis for Free Lights sessions are going to be starting in Eastville Park next year, as well as the work with local asylum seekers. I was just wondering if you could expand on what the other opportunities are for those tennis courts, and what it looks like, not just in Eastville Park, but over the course of the city as well.
Thanks, very. So, I mean, obviously, you know, sport is incredibly important to us as an administration, and only last week, actually, we had another one of our sports gatherings with Bristol Sport, Westport, and the whole shebang of people that are driving sports in Bristol. Mass participation, world-class events, making sure that talent has every opportunity to develop in Bristol. But there has been investment in St George and Canford, I believe, and these are also providing success thanks to the partnership between the council and the Lawn Tennis Association. So, you know, while, you know, we really welcome that other councillors who initially blocked similar investment in their areas have since changed their minds, it does seem like the window has closed, or at least is closing, from the Lawn Tennis Association now, which is inevitable. So, you know, and particularly I'm thinking of Redcatch Park. And I know that Councillor Dudd, as the former cabinet member for sport, would like you to come in on this one.
Cheers. Yeah. Obviously, it's been a very successful project, this partnership with the LTA. I know it was a subject of the first ever call in this authority, which was very surprising, as all I was trying to do at the time was to deliver investment into tennis, into parks, to improve things for people. And I was very surprised at the opposition at the time. Unfortunately, the LTA have moved on, so how they're handing out the money has changed, so that money's no longer available. So all those tennis courts where that investment was blocked by local councillors, it's not available anymore. So I'm thinking of Redcatch Park and the Adar. So that the ship has sailed due to the opposition there.
Thank you. Before we move on, those people who are able to, when they're responding or asking questions, if they could stand up, it makes it easier for members of the public and also for the webcam. Thank you. Moving on to question 4 from the Conservatives, Councillor Eddy, cost of public funding for minor council assets. Do you have any supplementary?
Thank you, Mayor, for your helpful replies. Much appreciated. I've got a question to your answer to. Could you look into the possibility of reducing the direct cost of the public, please, here? And if so, when?
I always look into the possibility of reducing the cost of anything that we're engaged in. Really happy to. But I mean, what I understand is that the installation price is given at cost, and there's no profit being derived. But if there are ways that we can reduce costs, then I'm all ears, and we'll ask Mike and the team to look into that.
Do you have a second supplementary, Councillor Eddy? Thank you very much. Move on to Green question 4, Councillor English, cycling infrastructure. She's not here. We'll move on to Lib Dem question 4, Councillor Hopkins, Bristol Energy. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, the first supplementary, you seem to be confirming there that the energy companies, it states in their accounts that they don't have to come back for further cash funding until next July. Is that without limit? And secondly, you talk about, and on that first one as well, it actually talks about people getting a good deal, but 80% of these people are outside Bristol. So as a local authority, why are we charging people in Bristol for this huge loss to subsidise people around the country?
Look, as I know there's obviously a form behind this one and people trying to work it out. Look, there is a strong case for walking away from Bristol Energy, all right? And we recognise that. But everything is a trade-off. And there's also a strong case against walking away from Bristol Energy. So the reality of it is, even though we like to portray the world as binary options, 100% good, 100% negative, and that makes for great leaflet material, that's not, I mean, I think when we're not performing in this chamber, we'll all recognise that that is the reality of leadership. It's trade-offs and there's ups and downs to anything. The major challenge of walking away from Bristol Energy would have been crystallising all the losses that we'd have then incurred. We'd have made them into losses, ignoring the social value impact of the company for the city, whichever way we cut it up is around 12 million pounds as of 2016. And I think one of the challenges is just really missing the point that as just how critical Bristol Energy has been to our ability to drive the City Leap, which is that £1 billion of investment package that offers the opportunity to transform the city's relationship with energy, from the generation to the distribution to the storage and the way we use it. Bristol Energy was critical to making that package of investment, which is progressing now, possible. And the payback is that package of investment offers the opportunity to transform what Bristol Energy is, the position it has, and its position in the future, and the level of opportunity it presents us. To ignore that context is, anyway, it's not a context I was ever prepared to ignore, and that's how we made our decision. Do you agree with it or not?
And second supplementary with regard to Robin Hood Energy, surely this is an organisation that was set up at similar time to Bristol Energy, run by a local authority. It's very easy to argue that neither of them should have been set up if more sensible judgment had been made. But it is surely essential that we learn by looking at their comparatively better performance under similar circumstances, and that we therefore... Oh, my apologies. That it's absolutely essential that we look at a company set up under similar circumstances to Bristol Energy and work out why their losses per customer, etc., are significantly better in terms of performance than Bristol Energy.
So we've spoken to Robin Hood, but it's not appropriate for me to comment on Robin Hood in this chamber.
Thank you. I'm afraid that brings to an end our time for questions. So that concludes questions today. We do have time for some statements, so we'll move to the statements received. In terms of the procedure, I would remind members the following. You have a maximum of 1 minute should be allowed for the presentation of each statement. There should be no debate on the statements, and I, as Lord Mayor, shall refer them to the Mayor for consideration. Statements will be dealt in order of receipt. Move to statement number 1. Councillor Claire Hiscox, Vehicle Encampments, Roslyn Road, Horfield.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. We've had a lot of discussion in question time about van dwellers and the issues that it causes. but my statement is, as you can read, about a particularly bad issue in Rosling Road in my ward, which has, I think, shown that the policy has not really worked for anybody, because it has gone round and round in circles, and there's been quite a lack of communication. And I think what we need to do is look at the policy again to really care about not just residents and the businesses that are affected, but also the people that are living
you have 10
in
seconds
those conditions. Because leaving somebody for 3 months in a van like that could actually be quite detrimental to their health. So I think the whole thing needs looking at again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move on to statement 2, Councillor Threlfall, Royal Hill and road safety issues. You have 1 minute. She's gone. Okay. Statement number 3 is Councillor Thomas, residents and visitors parking permits. You have 1 minute.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. Just really to register our concern at the introduction without consultation, certainly without letting local councillors know about electronic residents and visitors parking permits. This does seem an example of something where having had consultation and potentially an equalities impact assessment would have been really good, because forcing older people who don't have internet access into e-residence parking permits and visitor permits is very inconvenient and feels inappropriate. And we'd just really like some more thoughtfulness about how this is taken forward, potentially sort of paper permits to run alongside it, as other councils do.
Thank you. Okay. That concludes the statements which we note, and I refer to the Mayor for his information and consideration. That draws to a conclusion this section of the meeting. If we have a couple of minutes just to adjust ourselves if necessary, and then we'll get on with the formal full council at 2 o'clock.